Trust Me Travel presents Istanbul, Turkey. This is Travel Time with Robert and Tracy. Istanbul is in the far western part of Turkey. It is right on the Bosphorus Strait where Europe and Asia collide. And so Europe is on the left-hand side of the Bosphorus and Asia is on the right-hand side. We'll be in the old city center called Sultanahmet, which is located along the Bosphorus and separated on a peninsula by the Golden Horn. The airport, you start to see this cultural change. You see this full-dress burqa. These are tourists from other more conservative Muslim countries coming into Turkey. Of course, Tracy's a little bit concerned about the introduction into Turkey and Middle East, but by the time we get to the hotel, she's pretty comfortable about the whole situation. The Hotel Sultanahmet, but I liked it because it seemed to have a little bit of a Turkish charm. But the real advantage of the hotel was its first location in the heart of everything, and second of all, the views that you got from its rooftop terrace. This is a mosque off to the left-hand side of the hotel, looking out over Istanbul. We're now looking down onto the Hagia Sophia, a couple of mosques off to the background there. And then you will be able to see the Bosphorus Strait. And this is the shipping that is waiting its turn to travel up the Bosphorus, up into the Black Sea and into the Russian ports there. But also from the city across the Golden Horn, which is an arm of the sea that separates the old city from the new city, you can see the new city. Another important site is the Column of Constantine, this reddish brown column capped by the white stone. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Istanbul was established by the Romans as Constantinople. This is actually a Roman era road built by Constantine to connect his new capital Constantinople with Rome in Italy. Constantine was the first Roman emperor who became Christian. He wanted to establish Christianity and place part of the cross of the crucifixion in the foundation for this column. Roman engineering was so good that even today with modern engineering, the light rail system of Constantinople or Istanbul follows the old Roman highways and is now bordered by McDonald's. I don't think Constantine had any idea. But once you get away from the main road, the old roads, you get into some of these back alleys, which are much more ancient or medieval in their feel, small and narrow. And you soon run into the old city walls. This happens to be part of a wall that surrounded the old palace. But this is an Islamic city, and you'll see the minarets. These are the places where the Islamic priest or imam gathers to the top to call the faithful to prayers. But it's also a city of plazas and open spaces. After a day of travel, we're actually looking for a place for lunch, and we find these little sidewalk cafes, sit down and have a bite to eat. But after lunch, we're off to see the Grand Bazaar. And the Grand Bazaar is the world's largest covered market in. The bazaar was originally organized according to buildings or hallways. One building or hallway would be built for, say, textiles. Another one would be built for spices, as an example. Today, it's a little bit more jumbled up. The first building was built in 1456 by the Ottoman Turks as they took over Constantinople and made it into modern Istanbul. But the market has had buildings added to it over the years. There's about 26,000 people who work in the Grand Bazaar. About 250,000 visit it daily. We stopped by one of these rug shops in the rug area. They tried to sell us. Moving goods around the old city can be a challenge, and so this seems to be a pretty typical way of doing so. These men, generally they're all older, have a special backpack or something that rests these bags on. It kind of cradles into their back. You can see this gentleman here resting on his backpack. Seems like a hard way to make a living. We're headed off to the Suleiman Mosque. This was a pilgrimage venue for the 15th and 16th century Muslims who would come to Istanbul. 5 times a day in Istanbul, you'll hear the imam's call to prayer. And these come from the minarets throughout the city. Each mosque has at least one minaret of some sort. The more minarets you have, the more prestigious the area. The Suleimani Mosque, where we are here, has an outer courtyard surrounded by 4 minarets, the maximum amount allowed for an imperial mosque, which this was. Construction started in 1550 and was completed about 3 years later. In Islamic tradition, it's not appropriate to have pictures of animals or people in the mosque or home, and so you have images of calligraphy from the Quran, and you would have these intricate geometrical shapes and carvings in wood and the tile and as their way to decorate the facility. And you can see how skillful this was executed in this stonework here. And here's a close-up example of that. You're not allowed to wear shoes inside a mosque, and so you take your shoes off, place them in a plastic bag provided, and carry them in the mosque with you. The interior is one large open space, finished mostly in the reds and the golds and the browns that you can see. Again, the calligraphy from the Quran decorates the walls and geometric figures into the high dome. There is a small wooden barrier that separates the tourist section from the faithful. These are a group of men praying in the men's section of the mosque. The women's section, isolated from the men, is behind us on a slightly raised platform. There's a lot of bowing in the services for Islam, and so women tend to be behind and above men. Women cover their hair inside a mosque, and Tracy has done so. Outside the mosque, back out to the courtyard, it's a delightful place to catch the sunshine. Having left the mosque, we're headed back into the Grand Bazaar area, and specifically we're trying to find the spice market, which we do, and this is it. These are shops, one right after another, that have all sorts of different spices artfully displayed, readily available. It's a rather remarkable sight, and as you wander through the spice market, you end up down by the waterfront. The Bosphorus here separates Europe from Asia, but everyone on this bridge here crossing the Golden Horn was in fact fishing, and they are out here trying to catch their supper. As evening comes on and nightfall, the lights come on the mosque. This is the new mosque. It's also the Bosphorus Strait. It's about 3/4 of a mile wide there at the bridge, so that's quite a bridge. The next morning, we're up to see the rest of Istanbul. It's an interesting thing to be woken in the morning by the call to prayers from the imams and the minaret. Wandering through the streets of Istanbul, we're headed over to the Blue Mosque. The Blue Mosque has 6 minarets, but it is the last of the classical mosques to be built. Started in 1609, was finished about 7 years later. The Blue Mosque's real name is the Sultan Ahmed Mosque. The mosque was built on the side of a Roman racecourse called the Hippodrome, part of that, which is this obelisk that came from Egypt in Roman times. The mosque has 6 minarets, as I indicated earlier, 4 of which surround the front courtyard, 2 of which are to the other end of the mosque. Inside, you can see some of the blue tiles which has given the mosque its name, and there is a lot of stained glass. Of course, Istanbul, being on the edge of 2 continents, similar to Japan, has a lot of earthquakes. And as the earthquakes take place, the glass breaks, they replace it with new. The circular chandeliers or lights are just simply to provide light during the early morning or late evening hours. The Bosphorus is plainly visible from the Blue Mosque. You can see the shipping and the ferries. We decided to have lunch at a restaurant close by. This couple happened to be from Scotland. We next stopped by Topkapi Palace, which was the home of the Ottoman sultans for nearly 400 years. The palace consists of a number of courtyards. This happens to be in the first courtyard and was called the audience chamber. This is where you came and paid your respect to the sultan. Deeper into the palace, you come upon the private residences. This was the sultan's private entrance into one of his chambers as well. As with the mosques, the ornamentation is in Islamic script. The golden blue of the tiles help complement the marble work of the area. But this was a palace that made a statement that you have arrived in the area of great power and wealth. and it is a delightful area with great views of the surrounding area. But right next to it is the Hagia Sophia, which is an old Christian church. Started under Constantine in 360 AD, it was finished many years later by Justinian. It is one of the largest enclosed spaces in the world. The gray to the side of your screen here is actual scaffolding that is in place for a stabilization process for the building itself. But again, it was started as a Christian church, but with the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks, it was turned into a mosque and was a mosque for another 300-400 years after that. With the end of World War I, Turkey becoming a more secular country, this was reverted back to a museum, and as a museum they have discovered the Christian mosaics under the paint and plaster that had been applied by the Ottoman Turks to cover it. And as they've removed this paint and plaster, it has revealed these great intricate designed mosaics of astonishing detail. This particular mosaic, you see Constantine on the left, his wife Sophia on the right. Looking down the hallway, you can see the intricate design of the original building. Leaving Hagia Sophia, we are literally walking across the street to a place called the Basilica Cistern. This was a Roman construction underground for water storage for the drinking water of Istanbul. It was built out of scavenged material from across the empire. This happened to be a Medusa head used as the base of a foundation for a pillar that was never meant to see the light of day. And here is another Medusa head, upside down this time. But it's a magical little spot, very interesting place to see. Roman engineers had a series of pipes that led from the cistern out to these fountains along the side of the roads, and people got their water. Using the public ferries, we want to cross over the Bosphorus to the Asian side. And catching the right one was something of a challenge. We did catch the right one, and we're saying goodbye to Europe here, crossing over the Bosphorus, which is about a mile across at this location. We are now headed over to Asia. The Bosphorus is a very busy waterway. In addition to the ship traffic, you have lots of ferries that are making this crossing on a regular and consistent basis. As we approach the Asia side here, we have to wait for this ferry to pull away so we can pull into the berth to unload. And as you unload, of course, you see another mosque. The Asia side is very similar to the European side. You really can tell no difference between the two halves of Istanbul. After a delightful dinner in Asia, we cross back across the Bosphorus on the ferry, decide to walk back up the hill to the hotel. Passing by Hagia Sophia at night, you can see the lit up spires. The Blue Mosque right across the street from Hagia Sophia, of course. The next day is our last day in Istanbul. A little bit sad to leave. Would have liked to spend more time there, but again, from the rooftop terrace, you can see the Hagia Sophia there and the Bosphorus in the background again. We head off to find a calligrapher. This was a young man along the side of the street here who, for a fee, would write your name out into a Turkish-styled script. We also stopped by this little juice stand, and for $3 US, a fresh pomegranate or orange juice. We're off to the airport to catch our flight to Milan, Italy. Passing through security, you come upon Victoria's Secret. It is not necessarily a secret in Turkey. There are various stores in the more modern part. But as I said, we're off to Milan to eventually catch a train and head to Venice. But that's another time on Travel Time with Robert and Tracy. Presented by Trust Me Travel. We have a large selection of travel videos on trustmewithtravel.com. So join us there, trustmewithtravel.com. Robert and Tracy wish you happy travels.